The Dragon King's breath came in ragged, ember-filled gasps. Each exhale sent waves of molten heat spilling across the broken throne room. His scales, once gold like the heart of the sun, had dulled to rust and ash. Outside the shattered fortress, his realm burned. The armies of stone and shadow he had once commanded now crumbled under the weight of their own rebellion. The age of dragons had ended. He lay upon the blackened floor, claws twitching weakly, his chest rising and falling like the slow death of a dying star. For centuries he had ruled this world, his wings the sky's shadow, his roar the sound of judgment. But even gods fall when time itself turns against them, and so alone in the ruins of his kingdom, the Dragon King prepared for his final breath. That was when he heard it. A sound so small it shouldn't have mattered. A heartbeat, not his own. It came from the doorway. Through smoke and ruin a figure walked, small, fragile, wrapped in tattered cloth and human skin. No armor, no weapon, just a quiet determination that somehow cut through the smell of burning stone. The Dragon King's vision blurred. "Leave," he growled, voice trembling the ground. "All who stand before me die." The human did not flinch. He stepped closer, eyes glinting in the flickering firelight. "You don't have to die alone." A bitter laugh escaped the dragon's throat, a sound like mountains splitting. "You think to comfort a god?" "I think," the human said softly, "you're not one anymore." Silence fell. In the far distance, thunder rolled. The sound of collapsing mountains, of a world moving on without its king. The Dragon King turned his fading gaze toward the human. "Do you know what I've done?" The human nodded. "You burned the world to keep it from forgetting your name." The dragon's chest rumbled with something like a sigh. "Then why come here, little mortal?" "Because," the human said, "names can be remembered without fear." The dragon stared, unable to speak. For centuries he had crushed kings, scorched armies, ruled empires of fire and fear. Yet no one had ever looked upon him like this. Without terror, without awe, only pity. It broke something inside him. His claw trembled as he reached toward the human, each scale dripping molten gold. "You would speak mercy to a monster? I would speak truth to one who's forgotten how to hear it." The Dragon King closed his eyes. The heat faded from his scales, the fire dimming within. He had ruled for eons, believing only strength could shape the world. But here stood a creature so small, so fragile, yet unyielding. A being who faced him not with blade or spell, but compassion. "Human," the dragon whispered. "What is your name?" The human knelt beside him, placing a hand upon his claw. "My name doesn't matter. I came because someone had to." The Dragon King felt the world tilt. The breath he drew next was cold, the first cold he had felt in millennia. "And what would you have me do?" "Before the end, live," the human said simply. The word struck harder than any weapon. Something flickered deep within the dragon's dying heart. A spark, a pulse. The ember that had refused to die even after the world stopped believing in dragons. He felt it, warmth returning, spreading through him. Not the fire of rage or conquest, but something gentler. Hope. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the Dragon King wept. Outside, the storm broke. Rain fell across scorched lands for the first time in an age. The earth hissed, steam rising where water met flame. When the dragon finally rose, his wings no longer carried the weight of power, but of purpose. He looked down at the human, this small creature who had changed the course of an entire age, and whispered, "Then show me." The human smiled faintly. "Then walk with me, old one. There's still life left to save." The two of them stepped into the storm, a dragon reborn, and the mortal who had taught him what it meant to live. The storm raged as they stepped out of the shattered fortress, rain falling like molten silver, lightning dancing across the horizon. The Dragon King's wings stretched wide, shuddering under the cold for the first time in millennia. Steam rose as each raindrop met his scales, whispering away the sins of a dying age. The human walked beside him, unafraid of the shadow that loomed like a mountain beside him. The world around them lay in ruin, blackened forests, rivers choked with ash, villages reduced to memory. Every creature that had once worshipped or feared dragons was gone. "Why do you not run?" the dragon asked, his voice a low rumble beneath the thunder. The human didn't look up. "Because running doesn't rebuild anything. The dragon lowered his gaze, eyes glowing like dying stars.
Rebuild?
He murmured. What could be built upon ashes? Life, the human said. It always finds a way. The dragon fell silent. He watched as the small figure bent down, brushing his fingers across a patch of scorched earth. Beneath the soot, a sprout pushed through, fragile, trembling, but alive. The dragon inhaled sharply, his nostrils flaring. Impossible. Not impossible, the human said softly. Just forgotten. They walked for hours through lands that had once been his dominion, where dragons had ruled from the sky and mortals had lived in terror. The bones of his kin lay scattered across the hills, colossal skeletons bleached white by centuries of wind and dust. The dragon paused, lowering his head in silence. I remember them, he whispered. Proud, fearless, unyielding. His claws sank into the ground. And I killed more of them than time ever could. The human stood quietly. Then let their memory become your penance, not your curse. He looked down at the small mortal, fire flickering in his eyes. You speak as though forgiveness is yours to give. It isn't, the human replied, but it's yours to take. The dragon stared for a long time, then turned away. In the distance, lightning struck, not a symbol of destruction this time, but of awakening. Days passed. The dragon learned to walk beside the human, no longer towering above with arrogance, but moving with cautious restraint. The storms that had once obeyed his will now answered only to nature itself. And he found him strangely low that he did not mind. He began to ask questions. About humans. About their wars, their fears, their brief lives that somehow changed everything they touched. You live so short, he said one night as they camped beneath a cliffside. Firelight glinting off his dull scales. How do you find meaning in such a small breath of existence? The human smiled faintly, staring into the fire. Because it's small. That's what makes it matter. The dragon blinked. Explain. When you only have a little time, the human said, you learn to make it count. You fight harder, love deeper, build faster. You don't waste eternity thinking you have forever. You live like every heartbeat is borrowed. The dragon fell silent again. His claws scraped lightly against the rock, and for the first time in his endless existence, he felt the weight of time not as a burden, but as a gift. Then, as the night deepened, the ground trembled, the human looked up. The dragon's head snapped toward the horizon. Something massive moved beneath the surface of the earth. From the darkness came a sound, not thunder this time, but a roar, deep, old, wrong. The dragon's pupils narrowed into slits. That should not exist. What is it? The human whispered. The dragon unfurled his wings, blocking out the moonlight. Something I destroyed long ago. The ground split apart. Lava spewed into the air, and from the chasm below a colossal shape emerged, scales blacker than night, eyes burning with crimson fire. It spoke, voice echoing through mountains and storms alike. You live. Brother? The Dragon King's eyes widened. No, he whispered. Not you. The human stepped back, shielding himself from the wave of heat that rolled outward like an inferno. The creature rose, a twisted reflection of the Dragon King himself, corrupted, reborn through hate and time. I died in the flames you lit, the dark dragon said, his voice a snarl of rage. And now I rise in the ashes you left. The Dragon King's heart thundered. You should have stayed buried. The corrupted dragon's wings unfolded like shadow tearing through heaven. And you, it hissed, should have stayed a god. The human looked between them, feeling the air tighten like a drawn bowstring. What is happening? The Dragon King's claws flexed, molten light flickering between them. The past, he said quietly, has come to finish what I began. And then the world exploded into fire. The mountain shook as the two dragons collided, titans of a forgotten age tearing through stone and sky. Lightning ripped across the heavens, the ground split open, and rivers of molten fire coursed through the valleys. The human stumbled backward, shielding his face as the shockwave hit. Rocks shattered, trees burst into flame, and for a moment the entire horizon burned. The Dragon King roared, not in rage, but in sorrow. Every blow he struck felt like reliving a nightmare. His claws clashed with those of his corrupted brother, sparks raining like stars torn apart. You should not have survived, the Dragon King bellowed, his voice echoing across the shattered peaks. Neither should you, the Dark One growled, eyes glowing crimson. And yet here we are, gods pretending to be mortal. The Dragon King's fire erupted from his jaws, white-hot and pure. The blast engulfed the corrupted dragon, shaking the world to its core. But when the flames cleared, his brother still stood, scales gleaming like obsidian forged in hell. "You cannot burn what's already ash," the dark dragon hissed. The Dragon King lunged again, but the corrupted one caught his strike, twisting and slamming him into the mountainside. The crash sent avalanches tumbling down the peaks. The human ran forward, dodging falling debris. "Stop it!" he shouted, his voice drowned by thunder. "You'll destroy everything!" The dark dragon's gaze turned toward the tiny figure, curious, almost amused. "And what are you, little ember, a pet?" The Dragon King roared, forcing himself up, wings trembling with fury. "Touch him, and I will burn the stars themselves to destroy you," the Dark One sneered. "Then you've grown weak indeed." With a single beat of his wings, he summoned a storm of black fire. It roared across the sky, swallowing the light, devouring air itself. The human dove behind a slab of stone as the flames passed overhead, heat searing his skin even through cover. When the smoke cleared, the Dragon King was still standing, chest heaving, his scales cracked and glowing from within. The human pushed himself up, coughing. "You can't win this way," he said, voice hoarse. "He's not fighting you, he's feeding on your power." The Dragon King's eyes widened. "What?" "He's drawing from your rage," the human said. "Every time you strike him, he grows stronger. He wants you to hate him." The dark dragon laughed, the sound like stone grinding against bone. "The mortal understands," he said mockingly. "How tragic that the king does not." The Dragon King's claws clenched, trembling. He could feel it, his fury turning against him, the flames within him twisting, corrupting. Then a hand touched his scales. Small, human, steady. "Let it go," the human said quietly. "You don't have to fight like this." The Dragon King stared down at him, this fragile creature who dared to touch a god. But in that touch, something ancient stirred. He remembered a time when dragons and humans had fought side by side, when they had shared not war but understanding, when a single act of trust had ended an age of chaos. He looked back at the dark dragon. "You are right," he said. "I am not what I once was." And for the first time, the fire in his eyes cooled. The corrupted one sneered. "Then you are already dead." The Dragon King's voice rumbled like a promise. "No, I have simply learned how to live." He turned his gaze to the human. "Climb onto my back." The man hesitated for only a moment before obeying, climbing between the dragon's shoulders, gripping the ridges of his scales. "What are we doing?" he asked. "Ending this," the dragon said. The air exploded as he launched himself into the sky, wings tearing through storm clouds. The dark dragon followed, shrieking with fury, his black fire streaking behind him like the breath of hell. They rose higher and higher, beyond the storm, beyond the light of the burning world, until stars surrounded them like silent witnesses. The human could feel the air thin, the cold bite of the void creeping in. "We can't. Trust me," the Dragon King said, his voice deep and steady. He looked down at his brother, who was rising to meet him. "Once," he whispered, "I destroyed you with hate. This time I will save you with fire." He opened his jaws, but the flames that came forth were not rage or destruction. They were golden, radiant, pulsing with life. The light engulfed everything, the human, the dark dragon, the world below, and for a heartbeat, it felt as if creation itself held its breath. When it faded, the sky was quiet again. The dark dragon was gone. Only drifting embers remained. The Dragon King's wings trembled, smoke rising from his chest. The human held onto him tightly. "You did it," he whispered. "No," the dragon murmured. "We did." But before he could descend, a crack of energy split the sky, and from that golden fire something began to emerge. Not darkness, not death, something else. When the light finally dimmed, silence fell over the sky. The storm clouds that had once raged beneath them were gone, replaced by a vast stillness, eerie, infinite. The stars shimmered faintly, yet their patterns were wrong. Too sharp, too bright. The Dragon King hovered there, wings beating slowly, smoke curling from his wounds. The human sat between his shoulders, trembling but alive, his skin glowing faintly, as if he'd absorbed some of the golden radiance. What happened? He asked softly, staring at his hands. They were no longer burned or torn. The wounds from the earlier battle were gone, as if erased from existence. The Dragon King's gaze scanned the void. This isn't our sky, he said, voice low. The constellations, they're older. Much older, the man frowned. Older? That doesn't make sense. We didn't go anywhere. He stopped, because below them, where once there had been a landscape of fire and ruin, there was nothing. No mountains, no valleys, no trace of the world they knew, only ocean. Endless, silent ocean. The Dragon King's heart sank. The fire wasn't just light, he whispered. It was a passage. The human turned, wide-eyed. You mean we crossed time? The dragon nodded slowly, or something beyond it. They descended, landing gently upon the glass-like surface of the sea. It didn't ripple. It didn't even move. The water was thick, luminous, like liquid starlight. The human crouched and touched it. The moment his fingers brushed the surface, ripples of light radiated outward, and for a heartbeat, images flickered across the waves, shadows of a world long gone. He saw cities made of crystal and fire, dragons flying beside machines that shimmered like silver suns, humans and draconic beings working side by side, building towers that reached the clouds. And then, war. He flinched as the visions darkened. The sky split apart, dragons fell in burning arcs, and the oceans boiled. The world collapsed in golden light, the same light that had brought them here. The Dragon King bowed his head. It's the memory of the old world, he said softly. The first war, the one that destroyed everything. The human looked up at him. You mean, the one you started? The dragon's eyes glimmered with pain. Yes, the human stood, still watching the water. So why bring us here?
Why now?
The air trembled. From the sea's horizon, something massive began to rise, a silhouette dark against the radiant waters. Not a creature, a structure. It towered higher and higher, a colossal spire of light and metal, carved with symbols that pulsed with power. The Dragon King stiffened. That he shouldn't exist? What is it? The human asked. The dragon's voice was barely a whisper. The throne of the first fire. The human blinked. That sounds important. It's more than that, the dragon said grimly. It's where the gods forged us, dragons, humans, all life that burns with will. It's where creation began. The spire's base struck the water, sending ripples of sound instead of waves. Each pulse vibrated through the air, shaking their bones, filling the sky with a low harmonic hum. And then, a voice echoed across the ocean. Not loud, but everywhere. You brought light where there should be silence. The human spun around, eyes searching the horizon. Who said that? The Dragon King lowered his head, his scales shivering. That is not something you want answering you, mortal. The voice came again, closer this time, calm, emotionless. The fires you unleashed were not yours to command. You trespass upon the sleep of beginnings, the human shouted into the air. We didn't mean to. We were fighting to survive. The voice paused. Then almost gently, and in doing so, you've awakened the end. The spire flared brighter, a beam of light erupting into the heavens. The Dragon King unfurled his wings, shielding the human from the blinding brilliance. When it faded, figures stood upon the sea, dozens of them, tall and graceful, made of pure light. Their faces shifted like reflections in rippling water. Their eyes glowed gold, and their voices spoke as one. You were not meant to endure, children of flame. Yet you persist. Why? The Dragon King stepped forward, his voice steady but heavy. Because life endures. Because the fire does not ask permission to burn. The light beings regarded him in silence. Then one turned its gaze toward the human. And what of you, small echo of dust? You bear the spark of something older, something forbidden. The human's pulse quickened. I don't know what you mean. But even as he said it, his chest burned with that same golden light. His heart thudded like a drum of thunder. The nearest being stepped closer. You carry the flame of origin. It was lost when your kind were unmade. Yet here it burns again. The Dragon King's eyes widened. Impossible. The being tilted its head. Is it? The circle completes itself. The flame returns to where it began. The human staggered back. You're saying I'm... What, a weapon? The being's light pulsed brighter. No, you are the memory of creation, reborn in mortal form. You are the reason he still lives. The Dragon King turned toward the human, eyes blazing with shock. You're the reason I woke from the endless sleep. You called me back. The man could barely breathe. I don't understand. You will, the voice said, soft but infinite. When the flame chooses. And then the world shifted again. The light shattered. The sea dissolved. They were falling through stars. Through time. Through memory. The last thing the human heard before darkness claimed him was the Dragon King's voice, filled with awe and fear alike. You are not just human. You are the fire itself. When the human awoke, he was lying on a bed of ash that glowed faintly with embers. Above him stretched a sky split in two, half of it burning gold, half a dark, starless void. The air itself trembled, humming like a living thing. He sat up slowly, coughing as the dust cleared around him. The world was not the same as before. It was fractured, dreamlike. Mountains floated in the distance, tethered by veins of molten light. Rivers of starlight flowed uphill. Every breath carried the taste of metal and ozone. And standing nearby, the Dragon King watched him in silence. His scales were cracked, his once mighty horns dulled with age and exhaustion, yet his eyes burned brighter than ever, like two dying suns refusing to fade. You're awake, the dragon rumbled softly. Good. I wasn't sure you would survive the transition. The human blinked. Transition? This place is not a world, the Dragon King said. It's a scar. The border between what was and what might still be. The man pushed himself to his feet, wincing at the faint glow now pulsing from his chest. The same golden light, the one that had burned through his wounds, the one those beings had called the flame of origin. He touched his sternum. Why does it hurt? Because it's alive, the dragon replied. And it's remembering. The human looked around, unease prickling at his spine. The world whispered. He could hear faint voices carried by the shifting winds, echoes of laughter, screams, and ancient prayers. They came from nowhere and everywhere. Where are we exactly? He asked. The Dragon King's wings unfurled slowly. We're standing inside the first breath of creation. The human stared at him. That's not possible. Neither is your existence, the dragon said. And yet here you are. He turned his massive head toward the horizon where the golden half of the sky was beginning to dim. The light is dying faster now. The boundary between creation and the void is collapsing. Because of me, the dragon hesitated. Because of what you carry. The flame wasn't meant to exist without balance. Long ago there was another power, a counterpart that bound it. When that power was destroyed, the flame went into exile, hidden, forgotten until now. The human frowned. And now that it's awake? It will burn, the dragon said. It will consume everything, including you. Silence fell between them. The air buzzed with heat and ancient energy. The human's hands shook, but not with fear, with a strange certainty that something within him knew what the dragon said was true. He took a slow breath. Then there must be a way to stop it. The Dragon King gave a low, hollow laugh. You sound like the first humans did before the wars, before they forgot what they were capable of. Always looking for control. He stepped closer, lowering his head until one massive golden eye met the man's. But control means nothing to the flame. You can only choose what it burns for. The words hung in the air like prophecy. Before the human could respond, the world began to shift again. The dark half of the sky shimmered and something vast stirred within it. Shapes, dozens, hundreds emerged from the void. Not solid. Not living. Shadows wrapped in armor of light, their forms flickering like dying stars. Each carried a blade that pulsed with the same energy as the spire they had seen before. The Dragon King's wings snapped open. His scales ignited with red fire. Run! The human froze. What are those things? The sentinels of the void, the dragon growled. The flame's jailers. They guard the silence between creation and destruction. The first of the sentinels landed upon the ash plain, its voice a whisper of thunder. Return the flame. The human's chest burned brighter. He clutched at it, gasping as the light seared through his veins. The dragon reared back, unleashing a roar that shattered mountains. Fire poured from his mouth in rivers of molten gold, slamming into the approaching army. The explosion tore the sky apart. The very stars screamed. When the smoke cleared, the human was kneeling amid the chaos, trembling as the light within him pulsed like a living heart. He looked up at the Dragon King, who stood between him and the advancing shadows, his body already bleeding smoke. Why are you doing this? The human shouted. The dragon's answer was a low, thunderous growl. Because once, a human gave me a reason to live. I will not let you die without finding yours. The ground erupted. Blades of light descended. The dragon met them head-on, his fire burning brighter than ever. The sky turned white. The human felt the flame inside him surge in response, not as pain but as memory. He saw flashes, the first dragons born from stars, the first humans molded from ash, the bond between them that had once balanced the universe. And then, one final vision, a dragon kneeling before a dying human, whispering, "Remember the fire." He gasped as reality snapped back. The Dragon King was falling. The sentinels closed in. Something inside him broke. He screamed, not in fear but fury, and the world caught fire. The ash plains erupted. The void screamed as it was forced backward. The flame of origin erupted from his body, taking the form of burning wings that stretched across the entire horizon. He rose above the battlefield, his eyes glowing with the light of a newborn star. The sentinels faltered, their blades dimming in the radiance. The Dragon King looked up through the haze, his voice ragged but proud. "You found it." The human stared at him, fire swirling in his hands. "No, I remembered it. The storm of creation did not end. It deepened. The sky, if it could still be called that, rippled in concentric rings of molten light. The void recoiled, screaming in colors that had never existed before. The human hovered above the ruined plain, his body half shadow, half sunfire, every breath radiating power ancient enough to rewrite the stars. Below him, the Dragon King watched with awe and dread. His wings trembled from exhaustion, his scales cracked, yet his heart, an ember of the first star, beat faster than it had in millennia. He knew what he was witnessing. Not rebirth, not resurrection, return. The flame of origin was awake again, and it had chosen a vessel that remembered how to fight. The human's voice echoed, not through sound, but through the very air. "They called this a prison." His eyes burned gold and white. "But it's not. It's a cradle." The sentinels regrouped across the horizon. They no longer marched. They drifted, drawn like insects toward the brilliance that seared them. Their leader, taller than mountains, stepped forward, its armor fissured from the dragon's earlier fire. The being's voice carried the gravity of galaxies. "You cannot exist," it said. "The balance forbids it." The human descended slowly, landing upon the shattered earth. Each step left behind glowing footprints that didn't fade. His voice came calm, resolute. "Then the balance needs to learn what happens when it tells a human what they can't do." The Dragon King's head bowed. He almost pitied the sentinels. The next instant, reality broke open. The sentinels charged, blades of void fire slicing through the world itself. The human met them with bare hands that burned brighter than stars. Every strike twisted physics, their weapons melted, their forms dissolved. Their screams becoming echoes in time. He moved like memory, like inevitability, and still they came. The Dragon King gathered his remaining strength, spreading his wings wide. "You can't fight them all." "I don't have to," the human said softly. "I just have to remind them what life means." Slammed his fist into the ground. The explosion didn't create fire, it created existence. Grass, light, rivers, the world beneath him healed where his rage had struck. The void screamed as it was replaced by creation itself. For a moment there was silence. Even the sentinels paused, uncertain. Life, true, chaotic, unmeasured life, was spreading through the scar of the cosmos. Flowers bloomed from starlight. New constellations rose where weapons had fallen. The Dragon King stared in wonder. "You're rewriting the world." "I'm not rewriting," the human said, his gaze distant. "I'm remembering the first draft." Then suddenly he staggered. The flame flickered. Cracks spread across his arms, veins glowing white-hot beneath the skin. He gritted his teeth as arcs of energy lashed from him, forming streaks that burned holes through the sky. The Dragon King roared, leaping toward him. "You can't hold that power alone." "I have to," the human gasped. "If I stop, everything burns again." The sentinels sensed weakness. They surged as one. The dragon intercepted them, wings wide, flame pouring from his mouth. It wasn't enough. The void's army closed in. And then, through the blinding chaos, a new sound split the air. A pulse, steady, rhythmic, familiar. It was a heartbeat, not Not the humans. Not the dragons. Something older. Something planetary. The Dragon King froze mid-flight. No, it can't be. The ground beneath them split open. From the cracks emerged tendrils of molten stone, shaping themselves into colossal serpents. Dragons billions of years dead, reawakening one by one. Their roars shook existence itself. The first brood, the Dragon King whispered. The gods of flame. They remember you. The human looked up through the firestorm, eyes wide. The ancient dragons bowed, not to the Dragon King, but to him. One spoke, its voice a choir of volcanoes. The flame has found its heart again. The covenant shall be reforged. The Dragon King turned to the human. You're no longer mortal. You are the bridge between life and creation itself. The human shook his head, fire spilling from his breath. I'm still human. That's what makes this real. He stepped forward, raising his hand toward the void where the sentinels gathered their last strength. Because we build, we destroy, we grieve, and we keep going. Light erupted from his palm. The void collapsed. The sentinel screamed as the universe itself folded inward. But in that moment, the human felt it. A familiar presence behind him. Whispering not in words, but in memory. The voice of the one who had died to save him before. Remember the fire, but never forget the reason you lit it. Tears streamed down his burning face. He smiled through the pain. I remember. The explosion that followed wasn't destruction. It was transcendence. The void turned to dawn. The sky filled with color no spectrum could define. The sentinels vanished, leaving only silence. And in the center of it all stood the Dragon King, his wings folded, watching as the human knelt among the ashes of rebirth. His body was no longer flesh nor flame, but something new, something beyond definition. The dragon approached, his voice barely a whisper. What are you now? The human's gaze lifted, golden and calm. What we were always meant to be. He reached out, touching the dragon's snout, and the world bloomed into light once more. The universe was silent for what felt like centuries. The light faded slowly, layer by layer, revealing the aftermath of what had just occurred. Stars had been reborn where none existed before. Rivers of molten gold flowed through the cracks of reality, and time itself shimmered like glass. Unsure whether to move forward or stay frozen in reverence, at the center of it all stood the dragon. King and the human, the last two beings who had seen the end and then made something beyond it. The human's form was shifting now, the flames softening, his edges becoming tangible again. He was still burning from within, but it wasn't destruction anymore. It was life contained in a body that shouldn't have been able to hold it. The Dragon King knelt before him. You've done what even gods feared to try. The human looked up, his eyes reflecting constellations being born and dying all at once. No, we did. The wind carried their words across the new world, a world that didn't exist a moment ago. The ash of the void had become fertile soil. The energy of destruction had crystallized into matter. Mountains rose, oceans boiled, clouds condensed into glowing vapor. Creation had begun to heal itself, but the silence didn't last. Far above the newly formed skies, something stirred. The remnants of the void, broken but not dead, began to twitch and pull themselves together. It wasn't a threat yet, but it was a reminder. Nothing ever ends completely. The Dragon King spread his wings, watching the dark horizon ripple. They will come again. The human nodded. I know. Then what do we do now? The human turned his gaze upward. We teach them what it means to live without control. He walked forward, barefoot on the glowing sand, every step leaving behind small bursts of light that grew into seeds. Flowers of plasma and starlight sprouted in his wake. As he moved, the air shimmered, and from the golden mist emerged figures, humanoid, winged, burning softly. They blinked into existence as if awakening from a dream. Each one was different, yet all carried traces of both dragon and human. The Dragon King stepped forward, eyes wide. They are children of the flame, the human whispered. Born from what we were, not from what was lost. The new beings looked around in wonder. They didn't speak, but they felt. They reached for one another, learning through touch, through warmth, through shared light. One of them, a smaller, fragile one, walked up to the human and touched his arm. What are we called? He smiled gently. Alive. For the first time since eternity began, the Dragon King laughed, a deep, resonant sound that made the stars tremble with joy. Alive, he echoed. Yes, that's what you are. But deep in the forming cosmos, something ancient was watching. The gods who had once ruled from their eternal thrones, beings of light, of logic, of authority, had witnessed what happened here. The destruction of the void, the rebirth of existence, the emergence of a race that was neither divine nor mortal, but something in between. They gathered at the edge of their dimension, their voices merging into one cold chorus. This cannot be allowed. The first god, formless, vast, spoke. A spark that creates without permission is a flame that consumes all. Another responded, trembling with doubt. But they brought balance, creation where there was none. Perhaps silence. The voice thundered through the void. They will learn their place or they will be erased. And so, as the human and dragon stood over their newborn world, the divine eyes of the old order turned toward them with judgment and fear. The Dragon King felt it first, a weight pressing down on the horizon. They're coming. The human's expression didn't change. He gazed at the sky as if expecting this. Let them come. You would challenge the gods themselves? A faint smirk crossed his lips. I didn't challenge them. I replaced them. The Dragon King's wings unfolded, his scales gleaming in the newborn light. Then let's remind them why dragons were never meant to kneel. The skies darkened. Bolts of divine wrath began to fall from the heavens like burning comets. The world shook under the return of godly rage. But the new children, half dragon, half human, stood firm beside their creators. They raised their hands, channeling the same golden fire that birthed them. The storm hit. And for the first time in cosmic memory, gods found themselves on the defensive. The human stood in the heart of the chaos, his voice a calm whisper amidst the thunder. We are not your servants. We are your successors. The Dragon King roared, unleashing a torrent of flame that split a god's form in two. Light and shadow collided. Creation screamed in ecstasy and terror. The new age had begun. The sky was a wound. It tore open, spilling oceans of divine light that burned through the newborn clouds and seared the land below. The gods were descending, not as beings of love or wisdom, but as titans of fear and control. Each step they took twisted reality, turning rivers to glass, forests to ash, and sound itself into silence. The Dragon King felt the tremor of their presence deep in his bones. His wings, vast enough to cast shadows across continents, trembled not in fear, but in recognition. These were the same gods who had chained dragons in the beginning of all things, who had written the laws of creation in fire and blood. And now, those laws were breaking. The human stood at the heart of the storm, barefoot upon the molten sands of a newborn world. His eyes were no longer merely human. They reflected galaxies spinning, dying, and being reborn. His aura pulsed like the rhythm of time itself. The new race, the children of flame, gathered behind him, half dragon, half human, their faces glowing with both awe and fury. One of them whispered, "They're beautiful." The human nodded, gaze fixed upward. They were, once. A voice thundered across the heavens, so vast it shook the stars themselves. "Mortal, you dare usurp the cosmic order?" The sky rippled as a colossal figure stepped through. Wings of blinding radiance unfurled from its back, and its eyes blazed like twin suns. This was Aurelian, the first god, the judge of all life. Around him came others, each a god of old creation. There was Vareth, the weaver of flesh. Solmara, the voice of souls. Charon, the lord of endless chains. The gods formed a circle around the planet, their voices merging into one command. Surrender your flame. Return the light to its keepers. The human looked up. His expression was calm, even kind. You call it light, he said softly, but it was never yours. It belongs to all who dare to live. Aurelian's radiance dimmed for an instant, as if he couldn't comprehend the defiance. Then you choose rebellion. The Dragon King stepped beside the human, his wings spreading wide. No, he chooses freedom. And with that, the gods attacked. Beams of divine energy scorched the sky. The air howled as the very concept of gravity faltered. Entire mountain ranges melted under the force of their rage. The children of flame screamed, not in fear but in fury. They raised their hands, and the golden fire of creation erupted outward in response. The world turned into a storm of color and chaos. The Dragon King roared, a sound older than time. His breath unleashed rivers of molten power colliding with the god's light. The shockwave shattered space itself, sending shards of reality tumbling into the void. The human moved through the battle like a shadow within flame. Wherever he walked, gods faltered. Aurelian raised his hand, summoning the spear of the first dawn, a weapon forged from the bones of dying stars. "You cannot fight eternity," he bellowed. The human caught the spear mid-flight. The energy surged through him, enough to tear dimensions apart. But instead of breaking him, it bowed to him. He turned it over slowly, the weapon's golden light shifting to crimson flame. "Eternity," he whispered, "is just another word for fear of change." He drove the spear into the ground, the planet screamed. The shockwave rippled outward, reversing the divine corruption spreading across the world. The gods staggered back as the flame of life erupted around them, consuming their light, devouring their arrogance. Their forms cracked and splintered, their essence unraveling under the very power they claimed to command. The Dragon King's scales glowed brighter than suns as he joined the assault. Together man and dragon became a storm of creation unleashed. Gods fell one by one, their divine forms shattering into shards of memory. Each fragment that struck the ground turned into a star, flaring briefly before settling into orbit around the reborn world. Aurelian fell to one knee, his form flickering. "You cannot replace us." The human knelt before him, his voice quiet. "We don't need to." He reached forward, touching Aurelian's forehead. Light poured from the god's body, not in destruction, but in peace. The god's eyes widened in realization as his form dissolved into dust and drifted upward, becoming part of the new dawn. The battle was over. Silence fell once more. The world breathed. The stars realigned, and at the center of it all stood the human and the Dragon King, surrounded by their people, the children of flame, now stronger than ever. The Dragon King turned to him. "It's done." The human looked up at the sky where countless new stars shimmered. "No," he said softly. "It's beginning." He raised his hand, and from his palm rose a single spark, a fragment of the power they had unleashed. He let it drift into the air where it blossomed into a new sun. "Every world," he said, "deserves its own fire." The Dragon King bowed his head. "Then let there be fire eternal," the human smiled faintly. "And may it never be controlled again." The stars flared in response one by one, as if the universe itself had heard his vow. And thus began the age of living flame, the era where gods were stories, dragons were guardians, and humanity stood not as conquerors, but as the spark that set existence free. The fires of creation had dimmed to a steady glow. What had once been a battlefield of collapsing stars and dying gods was now a world reborn, a canvas of molten gold cooling into oceans, of ash turning into fertile ground. The silence was not empty. It was full, pregnant with meaning, humming with the residue of divine power and mortal defiance. The Dragon King stood atop a mountain of obsidian, his wings folded like monuments against the dawn. Below him, the children of flame built their first city, their hands guided by instinct older than time itself. Every wall shimmered with threads of light, alive, breathing. The human walked among them quietly. His steps left trails of luminescence in the air, fading slowly behind him. He no longer looked entirely human. His veins shimmered faintly beneath his skin, his eyes reflecting the flow of stars above. But his smile was human. That stubborn, tired, fiercely kind smile. "Do you ever wonder what comes next?" a voice asked. He turned. The Dragon King was beside him, massive and radiant, yet his tone was almost gentle. The human looked out over the new horizon. "We've given them freedom," he said softly. "Now they'll learn what to do with it." The dragon's golden eyes narrowed. "And you burn brighter than any star I've seen, but all flames fade." The human chuckled quietly. "Then I'll fade knowing it was worth it." The dragon lowered his head so that his gaze met the human's directly. "You would leave them leaderless?" "Not leaderless," the human said. "Just free." He looked up toward the sky. The stars that had once been gods now shimmered with a softer light, no longer watching with judgment but memory. There was a long pause before the Dragon King spoke again. "You could have ruled, you know. You could have become what they were." The human's answer came like a whisper that carried across the cosmos. "That's exactly what I refused to become." A wind rose, gentle, warm, alive. It carried with it fragments of song from the city below. The children were singing. their voices mixing with the flicker of firelight and the hum of creation. The sound was ancient and new all at once, a hymn of life unchained. The Dragon King exhaled slowly, smoke curling from his nostrils. When the stars forget this day, he murmured, I will remember. I will tell the next age of who we were and what we dared. The human reached up and placed a hand against the dragon's scales. Then they'll never forget. The Dragon King lowered his massive head. You're leaving, aren't you? I have to, the human said softly. There's something beyond this. Something calling. Maybe more worlds to wake, more fires to kindle. The dragon's eyes shimmered with sorrow and pride. You were the first mortal I've ever bowed to willingly. Don't make me regret it. The human smiled, that same quiet, infinite smile. Then guard them, my friend. Teach them what strength truly means. Not domination, not fear, but choice. He turned, walking toward the edge of the world where the sky bent into the horizon. His body began to dissolve into light, first his hands, then his shoulders, until he was little more than a silhouette against the newborn sun. Where will you go? The Dragon King called after him. The voice that came back was faint, carried by the wind. Wherever the fire hasn't reached. And with that, he was gone. The Dragon King stood for a long time, staring into the horizon where the human had vanished. Then he turned back toward the city. The children of flame were watching him now, waiting, uncertain, hopeful. He spread his wings, each scale a beacon. He left us a gift, he said, his voice rolling across the mountains and valleys. Not a kingdom, not power, but the right to live, and to choose what kind of gods we wish to become. The people bowed their heads, not in submission, but in respect. Around them the first true dawn rose over the reborn world, light without judgment, warmth without chains, and above it all, among the newborn stars, a single flare burned brighter than the rest. It was shaped like a man, and for an instant, just before it faded into the endless dark, it smiled.